So the question is, what about that equity backstop that she brought up? How could you fund the deal? I see three possibilities. One is you get an existing shareholder to come. You take the existing shareholder base, you create that new private structure that they were talking about, that Leslie was mentioning. The other would be you get a strategic investor of some kind. You get a SoftBank or a Tencent, which has already been a strategic investor in. The third one is you get some kind of private investor or a sovereign wealth fund. You get some wealthy Silicon Valley guys. We've heard reports the Saudis invested 2 to 3%. That's a small amount, maybe $2 billion in there. So look at the five shareholders at the top here, the five largest shareholders in Tesla right now. You've got Elon Musk at about 20%. You've got T. Rowe Price at about 9%. Fidelity, Baillie Gifford, which is a big British investment firm. And then you had Tencent. They took a 5% stake last year. This is 50%. Five shareholders control 50% of the company. Let's assume that they stay in. The question is, you still need to raise, what, another 30 or $35 billion? 40 billion? David's saying a lot more than that.
You're right, 40, at least 40.
Yeah, okay,
right.
So where do you get the rest of it from? So we've already heard reports Saudi Arabia's got a 3 or 4% stake. That's what, $2 billion? Well, look at the sovereign wealth funds that are out there. There's a lot of money sloshing around out there. These are the biggest ones. Norway is a $1 trillion fund. China investment, this is the main one for China. The Gulf states have multiple investment funds, but Abu Dhabi's biggest one is $600 billion. Kuwait's 600. The Saudi Arabia, the public investment fund that reportedly took the investment of $2 or $3 billion in Tesla has $250 billion. So potentially, you could potentially put together something where the top five existing shareholders stay in. Then you get some sovereign wealth fund investment on top of some private investors. Maybe Tencent takes a bigger stake. Maybe your friends at SoftBank take a little bigger stake.
It would have to be in the form of a preferred again, because it couldn't really be debt, because there's no ability to actually pay it down in a meaningful way, given the lack of cash flow or EBITDA at the company.
And I'm assuming you roll over the debt.
Giant preferred, and then Musk would roll in, and he'd have voting control still. I mean, it is convoluted. Is being nice.
But do you see any other way, other than the three that I mentioned there, the existing shareholder, a strategic investor, and a sovereign wealth fund? You got to cobble together all of these. There's no other way to do it.
No. Although, Scott, we have tweets to go on and a board statement. And I'm reading from a JPM report this morning. Either funding is secured or it is not secured. And Tesla's CEO says funding is secured. Scott, thoughts on that?
Well, I think that it's a pretty interesting time to be in the automotive industry, and really the idea of taking Tesla private is really a very, very straightforward concept that will free the company up to focus on the thing it needs to be doing, which is producing cars at pace and getting to profitability. I think right now the overhead, the time and energy that is spent on being a public company is a real distraction to the business. And so the real question is there enough capital out there looking for companies that look like Tesla? And there's a lot of criticism about the fact that Tesla is not generating a profit at this point. But keep in mind, Tesla is a remarkable, just record-breaking company. It's generating right now about $16 billion in cash flow, but it's got a 5-year, 90+% compound annual growth rate by comparison to other companies in the auto industry that are shrinking or not growing at all at this point. So while it is not generating profit, it is a significant hyper-growth company operating at scale today, and it's doing something nobody's ever done before in producing an affordable electric car for the masses.
Scott, I want to dig into this idea that this is straightforward in terms of taking Tesla private. I mean, you just heard the debate that was going on here on this set. Sure. It's been hours worth of debate, really, over the past 24 hours about how that could take place. When you say straightforward, what do you mean by that? Are you suggesting it could be a leveraged buyout given those growth rates, or something else?
It's a straightforward concept. It's not going to be easy to do. You're going to have a lot of turmoil about this because Tesla is one of the most shorted stocks, period, of all time. But the reason that investors are shorting Tesla has nothing to do with Tesla's ambition or its goals, or the fact that it is something that they might even believe in terms of whether or not electric is going to be a powertrain for the future. The shorts and the sort of detractors are really betting on whether or not Tesla can pull it off in the time frames that are really required of a public company to report, that 90-day shot clock. As a former public company CEO, I can tell you that the idea of being able to focus on operating your business, especially when you're in hyper-growth mode and getting to mass production scale, is really a huge challenge. Why complicate that with being public? The process, the actual process of going public would need an anchor investor. The world is awash in capital, and there is capital that is absolutely looking for hyper-growth companies that are operating at that kind of scale. There's actually too much money to put to work.
But Scott, they have benefited from being public by the very ability that they've had to raise capital easily. And they've needed that capital to fuel the growth you're talking about. I mean, how much stock have they sold? Not to mention debt, obviously, which you can do as a private company. A lot.
Sure. So being a public company is about access to capital. And so at the time that Tesla went public, that was the right choice for the company at that phase in its company's growth. But today, the world has changed. We are absolutely in a very dynamic time, especially in the automotive industry. I'm running a company that's less than 2 years old. We've raised over $1 billion in debt and equity. The money is there. I think that right now what you have to look at is the fundamentals of the company, what they're doing long term. And Tesla has always been a bet about the future and whether or not this is going to be how people get around and whether or not they adopt electric as a powertrain.
Bob, one of the other things that Elon Musk tweeted about yesterday was the possibility, there's a lot of retail investors in Tesla. He tweeted about the possibility of a special purpose fund, and he pointed to the example of Fidelity and the fact that there are Fidelity funds that are invested in SpaceX. Is that possible?
Yes, that's why I brought up those 5 top investors. Listen, This is a guy who's putting people on Mars in the next 20 years. This is a guy who has turned the private space program into a real reality. This is a guy who's digging underneath Los Angeles. This is one of the great visionaries of the 21st century. 50 years from now, they're going to write the same stories about him that they wrote about Ford and Edison. That's my personal opinion. There is a vast number of people who believe, as I do, that he is one of the great visionaries, and they think that he's going to change the world. And that's why you might short Tesla, I would never short Elon Musk, though. And that's why I think he might have a shot at pulling this off.
Yeah, I would definitely not short Elon. I think that even the shorts in Tesla are not shorting what Tesla is doing or its long-term potential. They're really shorting the game of being public. And I think that right now the question is whether or not that capital exists to be able to go private. It would significantly streamline operations, allow the teams to focus on what they're doing. And right now, the idea that SpaceX, for example, would be a public company, it's building rockets, and there is a high degree of uncertainty around the outcomes there. But the payoff, the potential for that company to be incredibly valuable is clear. And so today, we have a liquid enough private market and enough large format investors where being private is straightforward. It doesn't mean the process of going private would be straightforward at all.
But that belief in Elon Musk, which I express and which I think millions of other people feel, may be the reason he'd be able to pull it off. He may be able to cobble together this vast store of investors and pull the whole thing off. David's just rolling his eyes at me. Obviously, you're not in that camp.
Just because we've never seen anything like it doesn't mean you won't.
I know, but we've never seen anything like Elon Musk. That's my point.
And I think there are a lot of shareholders, I think of Ross Gerber on Power Lunch just yesterday, who do agree with that.